Hello, and welcome to another episode of Architect Tomorrow. Today, we're going to look at smart cities, which is a topic that's been surging a lot within the community at the moment. We've had a lot of requests to cover it, and we've got a brilliant talk today to share with you that we pre-recorded with the Deputy CIO and CTO at the City of Vancouver, Leo D'Souza. So, Oliver, why don't you tell us a little bit about what Leo discussed with us?
Thanks, Ryan. So it's a great talk from Leo and from our colleague Chris Hallenbach, who's the CISO of the Americas, talking about what the reality of smart cities brings to many organisations. So convergence is a big theme that comes up, virtualisation, but as is collaboration and kind of working together. So there's some really insightful points that Leo makes and some interesting considerations for management, of assets and security of assets. The broader ecosystem that you exist in. So, it's a natural follow-on from our previous conversation on ecosystems and emerging technology. Smart cities perhaps aren't emerging technology, but the technologies that make up smart cities like 5G and Internet of Things and so on definitely are still emerging technologies. So, I want one of our best sort of talks to date. So I think folks are going to enjoy this one.
Yeah, it was great to see what Leo has been doing in the city of Vancouver. And talking about the 5G connectivity, there were ironically a few little jitters that we had with connectivity during this talk. But yeah, please don't let that put you off because the content is great. Let's dive into it.
Thank you for this opportunity. I'm looking forward to doing a little bit of a high-level overview of what we've been doing in the City of Vancouver. I'm the acting Chief Technology Officer, and I'm also the Deputy CIO. I wear multiple hats. But what I'm going to do is just walk you through a few slides to give you a sense of where we've been going over this last few years. And as Oliver said, there are many smart city initiatives around the world, and Canada ran a competition through 2018 and 2019, and we participated in that. So I'll just give you a walkthrough quickly on where we have gone and how things are going. And so, having been an enterprise architect since the early 2000s, I always think of blueprints and roadmaps and how do we move things forward. And we took that same architecture approach as we started to work together to try to understand what would we propose as a smart city initiative. And when you think of all the various technologies out there and capabilities out there, literally the rubber hits the road when you land in a city and you get this convergence of information technologies, operational technologies, leveraging data, concerns about cybersecurity. And so actually assigned a senior enterprise architect to help build our proposal. Underpinning all of this, the city had already been working on a digital strategy. And so we have these 4 pillars that were created as part of our digital strategy. And digital strategy for the city ran from 2013 to 2016. And now we've just taken the learnings from that, the capabilities we built, and embedded them into our regular work and delivery as we look at fix initiatives, requests from the public, requests from business, as well as how to advance the city. And we've looked at infrastructure and assets, and that's really what I'm mostly about today. A digital infrastructure based on an architecture blueprint, partnerships, and puts key investment in the right place. And then last, definitely not least, looking at ourselves as an organization and maturing our staff and capabilities so that we can actually fit well into this new digital world. So this is a summary graphic, and I think this is, for me, this is the thing that encapsulates what could happen in a city. Creating smart transportation corridors that would be crash-free, that would leverage autonomous vehicle mobility infrastructure, which depends on fiber networks, depends on 5G. Looking at user experiences and how you can use mobile devices to book an autonomous vehicle, get to where you want to go, see when the next vehicles are coming. actually implementing and trying out some of these shuttles that many manufacturers are creating, and making sure that they have the capabilities and the connectivity to be safe, so that we can avoid injuries from vehicle accidents. And then in the back end, really looking and building out a data and analytics capability that would support the maturing and evolution of this sort of blueprint or this conceptual model. So maybe I'll dig down a little bit further. So some of the things that we've been doing as part of the digital strategy, but also as we started to build out our Smart City Challenge proposal, we have been partnering with our engineering group, because as we build out our fiber network and our coverage, it's a shared responsibility model. And so we've been working with engineering, where if they're going to dig up a street, we will say, hey, let's get in there, put in bigger overbuilt conduit, recognizing that maybe it'll sit empty for a period of time. But at some point, as a friend of mine said, the wireless world is very wired, and there's a real dependency on having wired networks so that you can enable wireless for people to consume. The other thing that has become apparent to us is, as much as real estate is a valuable commodity, the real estate that are on our power poles and light poles are now becoming a critical asset for the city. And so we've developed an antenna attachment protocol that will allow telcos to put their devices onto our city poles and be able to start to build out their 5G networks. And they're currently using them for our 4G networks. And I think that the thing I wanted to end this slide on was, connectivity is not a luxury anymore. It's a must-have. And we need to find ways to use our fiber network, leverage the assets that we have to be able to provide that connectivity. So I spoke a little bit about this partnership with engineering and a shared responsibility model. The city has over 80 operational technology systems, everything from card swipe access systems to traffic control systems to water and sewer systems. And all of those systems, when they were initially put in place, they weren't designed to be connected. They weren't designed to be on the internet. But as we've advanced and progressed our capabilities, we're starting to connect those systems in. And what we've come to realize is we need this shared responsibility model that has expertise at the right level. And so you can see over on the right here, we've adopted this ISA 95 standard to be able to articulate what are the layers, who has responsibility at each layer. And at the lower layers, definitely our engineering colleagues are the experts. They run the operational technology systems. And then there's this sort of middle area where we have a shared responsibility. And then my team from the technology side takes over and has the responsibility to make sure that we can access the data, that we have the cyber controls in place, the networks keep running. So I'll wrap up with some of the things that we really had to focus on, which was building out capabilities within our technology organization to be able to make this smart city vision actually a reality. So focusing on an enterprise architecture team and building that out. Since then, has built our own project and program management office. We started to build out data and analytics practice and a team. And then I already spoke of our IT, OT program with our engineering colleagues. And I guess what I'd wrap up with is that all of these things need investment, they need people, they need time in order to be able to mature and develop so that you can actually securely implement smart city technologies in your organization.
I think we just have to touch on the irony of you talking about connectivity being not a luxury, and the fact that we've had a bit of jitteriness on the call so far. So I just want to kind of make a bit of a joke there that maybe it's because you're presenting and talking and so on. It's clearly that the fiber, you touched on fiber, maybe the fiber between the Atlantic is struggling a bit.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I have fiber to my home.
Yeah, I do
but
too.
I'm running wirelessly
Okay.
for this call.
It's probably that last wireless bit that's
Yeah.
anyway, no, it may well be Zoom, who knows? But anyway, no, right. I don't want to distract us too much. Right, Ryan, back.
Well, eventually we can debate whether or not 5G will solve those issues for us, right?
Yeah. I mean, and there's so many things that Leo's just touched on
Yeah.
there that I'd love to delve into. So I made some notes. So yeah, thanks, Leo.
Great. Yeah. Thanks a lot for that, Leo. Yeah, it's really great. Yeah, it's shame about some of the jitters there, but no, I think we got all of the points across. So thank you. And so if we continue the conversation on and actually look at the technology that will power our smart cities of the future, and that's namely the Internet of Things and operational technology. So Chris, as our CISO across the Americas, could you explain to us the distinction between these two technologies and illustrate the security and management challenges that customers may face in the future?
Yeah, I mean, well, one of the things that Leo actually already touched on, so, industrial control systems, process controls, operational technologies, these are things that have life safety implications. They need to operate in a defined way, things that could operate a waste management system, for example, or traffic lights. And if suddenly those lights go in the wrong direction, you could have a crash and impact to life safety. So they have to operate correctly all the time. Securing them is paramount for that, especially when you're talking about these systems in the context of a city. So they tended, for the longest of times, to be isolated in their own little world. The operators of them did their thing with them, and no one else really interfaced with that world. And suddenly, what we're seeing is that they're becoming more connected. And so now there is that need for a partnership between the IT operations side as well as the security side of things. And that's another piece. When you're talking about OT, you're talking about systems and devices that have an anticipated lifetime that could be 20 to 40 years in a number of cases. So these are things that you can't just go out to your big box store and buy a replacement for and plug it in tomorrow. These are things, and also upgrade them. The upgrades have to be planned out very carefully. Changes have to be done over a long period of time. There's expense in doing them, and potentially a lot of disruption when you do it. So all of those steps have to be planned out very, very carefully. That's vastly different than your IT ops world in a lot of ways. So it makes sense to have that distinction. I really like the model that Leo showed, where there is that breakdown of the layers, where the distinction and responsibilities lie. Leo's team's not going to suddenly become an expert in wastewater treatment. Right, that's not what he does. His idea of pipes are conduit for wiring, not for the waste and water flowing through. But his work is going to enable those others to do things. And I've seen over time, you'll see a very small locality has someone who runs a water plant. And he might get an alarm at 3 a.m. The last thing he wants to do is have to, deal with it by getting in a car, driving to wherever the plant is, do something with it, and come home. So you'd start to see those guys going out to a big box store and buying a commodity modem or something and attach it to these devices. That is a disaster from a security perspective. So when you can have a planned and architected strategy for how you're going to integrate these systems, manage them in a secure way, support them, because also, the opposite is true in this. I said Leo's folks aren't going to suddenly be wastewater management experts. Just the same, those wastewater management experts shouldn't become IT specialists and security experts. There is that distinction. They have, important roles to play in this. So yeah, it's interesting now to see people starting to think about how we're going to do things, how we're going to do it more effectively. A concern of mine is just how fast we are moving on the communications front in terms of what 5G is going to allow. It's going to allow for, much faster, much lower latency things. The temptation will be to bring in those technologies in an uncoordinated fashion. So it's incumbent upon us in the IT side of things to figure out how we're going to support it in a more systemic way and bring it in a managed approach. So that, to me, that's going to be the challenge. We have to think about it in that broader systemic way, and plan for it now so that we support these people before they go and do it on their own.
Yeah, you've touched on kind of collaboration being key, right? Which is often something we see over and over in many areas, kind of teams needing to work together to kind of get the best out of their specialism and also kind of connect with the broader kind of community. But the other thing I think is important, Chris, is perhaps the distinction between Internet of Things, the kind of consumer type devices that perhaps consume the connectivity in a smart city, versus perhaps the operational technology that's mission critical that you talked about. I mean,
True.
Have you got any sort of thoughts on how you kind of approach the security of those two different things?
Well, there's also differences even there. So you can go and get an IP-based camera for home use. It's not going to have the depth of features for management of it. It might not even have the ability to update it. Typically, when you're talking about Internet of Things that is focused towards consumers and their home use type situations, maybe even small business, there's a dearth of the ability to manage or update them. They're razor thin on their storage. So how do you do a firmware update? How do you even talk to it to do a firmware update? But that world also starts to incorporate more things, like building access management systems fall into an area where it's Internet of Things-ish, but also depending on what it does, it really does fall more closely aligned with that OT.
Probably more of a sort of sliding scale almost, isn't it? Of how consumer something is versus how sort of mission critical and industrial something is. And there's obviously a bit of a blurring in the middle.
There definitely is. And OT tends to kind of be a more of an encompassing umbrella. But there is that distinction between what's intended for consumer use and not. I think what's still important out of this is you still have to know what is in your network. Because there are going to be those things that you just simply, like I said, the nature of them, the resource constraint on the device, you're not going to be able to directly manage it. So in that case, you need to know it exists. You need to know whether or not you can segment it off in some manner or do something to manage the risk around it. Yeah. And those things will pop up in ways you might not even expect. You might have a digital thermostat that isn't even tied into your full building management system, but it's internet connected by itself. And what does that have in terms of interplay in your environment? And people bring things into offices all the time.
I mean, the question to Leo, I think, on this one is kind of, I guess that's kind of just increased your almost kind of IT landscape, isn't it? I guess the city of Vancouver before all this initiative was probably more how to kind of keep the back office of, running the city alive, right? The kind of finance systems, the tax systems, and, payment systems and various things like that. I guess now the IT, the enterprise architecture is almost the ecosystem of the city in a way, and the boundaries are perhaps getting a bit fuzzy around the edges.
Yeah, very much so, and I think that was a good way to talk about that spectrum, right, of the consumer back to the the heavy duty operational technologies. And the example I would use right now, and it tying in the pandemic, is we were averaging only less than 200 people working remotely before the pandemic. Now we have 2,800 people working all the time from home, potentially with their own devices. So the attack area and the surface area that we need to start to think about and protect has expanded astronomically. And these are people doing critical work for the city. They have access to critical systems. And so, we're looking at ways to get everybody a corporate device just so that we can manage the risk, because at least we can manage that device. Because I think to Chris's point, when you start using consumer-based devices, you don't have that rigor of patching and managing and control, even potentially, to say, I'm going to block that device. And I think that's concerning for me and definitely for my cyber team. Oh, maybe I'll add one more thing if I could. Just on Chris's point too about the in the past, engineers ran these operational technology systems. And I think the biggest challenge for us has not actually been the technology, it's been culture change. And so having these conversations, because engineers are very smart people, as are my IT engineers, but getting them to actually sit together and go, look, we don't want to run your stuff, but you really don't want to run ours. There's that balance and that partnership that you have to build the trust, right? Because they are looking after things that people will die if those operational technologies don't work well.
Yeah, I mentioned the traffic lights, but when you're talking about a water treatment facility, part of it is a process automation that applies chlorine gas to disinfect. And what happens if that system puts too much in or doesn't put enough in, and now you're putting out polluted water or unsafe water to drink if it's in a water supply system. There's very concrete examples where that has a range of implications for a population. And even more selfishly for those engineers, if they're in a plant and a safety system doesn't operate correctly, that's just an implication for them in that small space. So you have to have a very different conversation than what you might have had years ago. And I'm starting to see more of them have conversations around it. The problem is most of the conversations are focused on telling the OT engineers and operators that they need to be more secure, rather than saying, hey, you need to work with your IT staff to figure out how you can get there together. So the messaging right now I still see as being pitched directly to the OT operators around security, rather than saying, yes, you need to be more secure, but here's some people that should be able to help you with it. So I'm glad to see your city is being more proactive about creating that relationship and communication channel. How do we get others to that point?
Well, I think we, as many organizations did, we actually had an external consulting firm come in and actually help us do an inventory. And I'll go back to, and you've heard this saying by many folks, never waste a good crisis. Well, the WannaCry ransomware attack in May of 2017 was that crisis for us. And I took that and was able to leverage that with our senior executive in the city to say, hey, look, this is happening. We started to reach out and wanted to get a good and accurate inventory of all the operational technology systems we had. And we found we knew where the vital ones were. That wasn't the issue. But when we finally did this inventory over a period of time and realized it was 80 systems, not 20 or something, then we got really concerned. And then the next step was to start to take an assessment view of those and say, well, where are the gaps and the vulnerabilities? Because I think to Chris's point, engineers are smart. They will grab some technology, plug it in, get it working. But if they're going to Best Buy or using commercial grade networking, there are some serious concerns from our end. And we're probably, like I said, it's 2017, so here we are. We're 3 years into the journey, and we still have a long ways to go, just to really get that culture and that clarity put in place.
I'm sure Chris will say the same. And we hear this visibility challenge from a lot of folks, right? I mean, the whole you can't manage what you measure, and a whole bunch of other cliches around it. But yeah, the kind of stats you talked about aren't unusual, right? We hear of folks kind of having a gap of sort of 20% between what they know, what they think they have, and reality of what they have. When you were talking, it kind of made me think of the sort of moves towards DevOps and DevSecOps that have been happening. It almost feels like you're almost even one step ahead, and you're kind of dev operational or whatever, kind of buzzword you want to sort of throw at it. It kind of feels like you're having to sort of apply a similar sort of methodology to get those teams to collaborate and come together. But Brian, look, I'm keen to bring 5G into the conversation as well, because that's an important.
Okay, so I'll stop you right there, Oliver. We won't jump into 5G just yet. What we'll do is we'll create another episode and share it with you on that topic. And you will have noticed that we had a fifth panelist with us, Anna Fernandez, who's worked with telcos within Europe for the past 20 years. Oliver, why don't you tell us a little bit about what the next episode will include with Anna?
Yeah, no, so absolutely. I mean, it's all about, the surprising impacts, I suppose, of 5G, which is, a lot of folks just think perhaps it's 4G on steroids, but the reality is it changes the game around its properties around latency, low latency and capacity. And it's more about kind of business impact than consumer impact, So that's going to be a fascinating conversation with Anna around, the changes in how connectivity, and systems can be, linked up. And so it should be a really interesting dialogue, the next episode of Anna around, around the 5G theme and how it relates to the current crisis that we're working through. Perhaps with 5G technology, could we have handled the pandemic differently? Could we have leveraged the technology in a different way? And it's somewhat ironic to think that folks were, obviously very, some folks were very paranoid about 5G, and in reality is actually if 5G rolled out, perhaps we'd have more technology at our disposal to kind of manage what's going on. So a bit of irony there. But yeah, no, look, another great recording. And I think, those of you who found this interesting, by all means subscribe to our YouTube channel. Come and find us on our LinkedIn groups. So search for Architect Tomorrow. You'll find us there. By all means get involved and submit your ideas for future topics and comment and join the discussion on these topics.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot, Oliver. So look out for that next episode with Anna. It'll be interesting because we will dive into how the pandemic would have been different for us if we had smart cities and 5G. And please do comment if there's anything else you'd like to hear from any of the panelists that appear in our Architect Tomorrow community talks. And for now, we'll say thank you, and we'll see you on an episode shortly to Architect Tomorrow. Thank you.